My name is Jude, 27 years old, and I never imagined my downtown Boston apartment would become a battleground. After 3 years of overtime and sacrifices to afford it, I sat stunned at my parents' dinner table as they cheerfully announced I was gifting my home to my sister Rachel and her fiancé Tyler. The clincher? This was the first I'd heard about it. Their smiles never faltered as they volunteered my property without my consent. Before I tell you how this nightmare unfolded, drop a comment where you're watching from, hit like and subscribe if your family has ever made major decisions about your life without consulting you first. Growing up as the middle child in my family was an exercise in invisibility. My older brother Marcus excelled at sports, bringing home trophies that adorned our fireplace mantel. My younger sister Rachel was the princess, the apple of my parents' eye, whose achievements, no matter how small, were celebrated with fanfare. I existed somewhere in the middle, reliable Jude who never caused trouble but rarely received recognition. This dynamic followed us into adulthood. Marcus moved across the country to California, escaping the gravitational pull of family expectations. I stayed in Boston, close enough to remain involved but struggling to establish my independence. Rachel, predictably, remained the center of the family universe, her life choices receiving unwavering support regardless of their wisdom. My apartment represented everything I had worked for. After graduating from college with a computer science degree, I landed a job at a tech startup that demanded everything from me. For 3 years, I worked 70-hour weeks, took on additional freelance projects, and saved every penny possible. While friends traveled or bought fancy cars, I lived in a tiny studio apartment with roommates, eating ramen noodles and working through weekends. The downtown apartment was my reward. Located in a historic building with exposed brick walls and tall windows overlooking a tree-lined street, it wasn't enormous, but it was mine. 2 bedrooms, one I used as a home office, hardwood floors I refinished myself, and a kitchen I renovated on weekends. Every square inch represented sacrifice and achievement. This wasn't just property. It was tangible proof that I could make something of myself without family connections or handouts. Rachel, meanwhile, floated through life on charm and family support. She changed majors 3 times in college before settling on communications, with our parents covering the extended tuition without complaint. After graduation, she bounced between jobs, never staying anywhere longer than 6 months, with our parents always ready with financial assistance during her transition periods. When she met Tyler at a friend's wedding 8 months ago, everyone was surprised by how quickly their relationship progressed. Tyler worked in pharmaceutical sales, seemed nice enough, but something about their whirlwind romance felt off to me. Within 4 months of dating, they were engaged, with a wedding hastily planned for the following spring. When you know, Rachel declared when I gently questioned the timeline. My parents, thrilled at the prospect of a wedding and potential grandchildren, threw themselves into planning with gusto, never once questioning whether this rapid relationship might benefit from more time to develop. I supported them publicly despite my reservations. After all, family harmony had always been my responsibility as the peacemaking middle child. When Rachel complained about wedding venue costs, I helped her research affordable options. When she wanted custom invitations, I connected her with a graphic designer friend who gave her a discount. I even offered to host the rehearsal dinner at a restaurant where I had connections. My support, however, never seemed quite enough. There were always subtle comparisons. If only you had a serious girlfriend, Jude, we could be planning your wedding too. Or the classic, Rachel and Tyler are thinking about starting a family right away. Don't you want children someday? My achievements at work went unnoticed while Rachel's engagement dominated every conversation. The pattern of being taken for granted wasn't new. Throughout our lives, my parents had volunteered my time and resources without asking. In high school, they volunteered me to tutor Rachel in math without checking my schedule. In college, they gave out my phone number to distant relatives who needed tech support. Last Christmas, they volunteered me to drive an elderly aunt to and from family gatherings, a 4-hour round trip each time. 6 months ago, things had started looking up professionally. After years of grinding work, I received a promotion to senior systems architect. The salary increase allowed me to finally purchase my apartment outright, a milestone that filled me with quiet pride. The day I made the final payment, I opened a bottle of champagne alone in my living room, toasting to financial independence at last. The apartment renovations became my passion project. Weekends were spent installing new kitchen cabinets, painting walls, and selecting furniture that reflected my personality. Each improvement made the space more mine. The blue accent wall in the living room, the industrial-style light fixtures, the custom bookshelves I built by hand, these were physical manifestations of my identity separate from my family role. What made this achievement particularly sweet was that I had done it without family financial help. While my parents had paid for Rachel's college, car, and various apartments over the years, I had declined their offers of assistance, determined to stand on my own. This had earned me the occasional family joke about being stubborn or too proud, but the satisfaction of true independence was worth it. My relationship with my family remained cordial, if not particularly close. Sunday dinners at my parents' house in the suburbs were a monthly tradition, and I dutifully appeared with wine or dessert in hand. These gatherings typically revolved around Rachel's latest news or my parents' golf club gossip, with my contributions to the conversation receiving polite but brief attention. When the invitation came for a special family dinner to celebrate Rachel and Tyler's wedding plans, I assumed it would be more of the same. Perhaps they had finally settled on a venue, or maybe they wanted to discuss the wedding party arrangements. Never did I imagine that my hard-earned property would be on the menu as an entree. The evening started innocently enough. I arrived at my parents' colonial-style house in Newton, a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon in hand. The spring air carried the scent of my mother's prized roses, and through the windows, I could see the dining room chandelier glowing warmly. The familiar setting gave no hint of the ambush awaiting me. There he is, my father, Robert, a retired accountant with silver hair and the firm handshake of someone who believes character can be judged by grip strength, clapped me on the shoulder as I entered. The man of the hour. I brushed off the comment as typical dad enthusiasm. Hey, Dad. Mom around? In the kitchen with Rachel and Tyler. They got here early to help set up. He took the wine bottle, examining the label with approval. Nice choice, son. The kitchen was a flurry of activity. My mother, Linda, fussed over a roast while Rachel and Tyler arranged appetizers on a serving tray. Rachel looked up and gave me a quick hug, her engagement ring catching the light. Finally. I thought you'd never get here, she said, an unusual excitement in her voice. Tyler nodded in my direction, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Traffic was brutal coming out of the city, I explained, helping myself to a beer from the fridge. What's the special occasion anyway? Your invitation was pretty mysterious. My mother and Rachel exchanged glances. You'll find out soon enough, Mom said with a smile that, in retrospect, should have triggered warning bells. Dinner was elaborate by my parents' standards. Mom had prepared prime rib, twice-baked potatoes, and asparagus with hollandaise sauce, a menu typically reserved for major holidays. My father opened 2 bottles of expensive champagne, another red flag I missed entirely. Once we were all seated, my father stood and raised his glass. To family, he began, his voice carrying the practiced tone of someone who has rehearsed a speech, and to new beginnings. As you all know, Rachel and Tyler are starting their life together, and Linda and I couldn't be prouder. Standard wedding dinner fare so far. I lifted my glass along with everyone else. What you may not know, he continued, his eyes now fixed on me with a strange intensity, is how blessed they are to have such a generous brother in Jude. I took a sip of champagne, confused but still unsuspecting. Jude has always been the quiet one, the steady one in the family, not one for grand gestures or drawing attention to himself. But today, we want to recognize the incredible gift he's giving to his sister and soon-to-be brother-in-law. The champagne suddenly tasted sour in my mouth. Something was very wrong. Rachel and Tyler have been struggling with Boston's housing market, as we all know. Starter homes and condos are through the roof these days. My father smiled broadly. But Jude, in an act of remarkable family loyalty, has offered them the perfect solution. Every muscle in my body tensed as realization began to dawn. Jude is gifting them his downtown apartment as a wedding present. my father announced triumphantly, a fully renovated 2-bedroom in Beacon Hill. Can you imagine a better start to married life? The room erupted in exclamations and applause. Rachel beamed. Tyler looked simultaneously surprised and pleased. My mother wiped a tear from her eye, murmuring about family bonds and generosity. I sat frozen, my glass halfway to my lips, unable to process what I was hearing. My apartment, the one I'd worked 70-hour weeks for years to afford, the one I'd spent every spare minute renovating, the one that represented my independence, and apparently I was giving it away. My voice failed me as all eyes turned in my direction, expecting a humble acknowledgement of my extraordinary generosity. It's just like Jude to be modest about it. My mother interjected smoothly when I didn't immediately speak. He mentioned it to us weeks ago but didn't want any fuss made. That was an outright lie. I had never, not once, suggested anything of the sort. Rachel, Tyler, I finally managed, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. This is the first I'm hearing about this. An awkward silence fell over the table. Rachel's smile faltered slightly before she recovered. Don't be silly, Jude. Mom said you and she discussed it when you called last month. Another lie. The call she referenced had been about bringing wine to dinner, nothing more. I never agreed to give anyone my apartment, I stated flatly, looking directly at my parents. I had no idea this was being planned. My father waved dismissively. Now, no need to get into the details at dinner. We can sort all that out later. The important thing is that Rachel and Tyler have a place to start their married life, and you've generously provided it. But I haven't provided anything, I insisted, my voice growing firmer. That apartment is my home. I live there. I'm not moving out. Well, not immediately, my mother interjected soothingly. We know you'll need time to find a new place. Rachel and Tyler won't need it until after the honeymoon in June. The casual way they discussed uprooting my life left me speechless. June was barely 2 months away. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Tyler said, looking uncomfortable for the first time. Rachel told me Jude had offered the apartment. If that's not the case. It's absolutely the case, my father interrupted firmly. Jude's just being modest, always the quiet giver in the family. Rachel shot Tyler a warning look before turning to me with practiced sweetness. Jude, we don't have to discuss all the details right now. Let's just enjoy dinner, and we can talk about the timeline later. The implication was clear. The gift was non-negotiable. Only the logistics were up for discussion. The remainder of dinner passed in a blur. Conversation flowed around me as I picked at my food, unable to eat. My parents skillfully deflected any attempt I made to correct the record, treating my objections as mere technicalities rather than fundamental opposition. Rachel alternated between ignoring my obvious distress and shooting me warning glances whenever I tried to speak up. By dessert, my extended family members were raising toasts to my generosity, commenting on what a wonderful brother I was, how lucky Rachel was, and how this gesture exemplified the meaning of family. The reality that I had never agreed to any of this seemed irrelevant in the face of their determined narrative. As coffee was served, my Uncle Frank patted me on the back. Your father always said you were the responsible one. Nice to see family taking care of family. I nodded numbly, rage and bewilderment battling within me. This wasn't taking care of family. This was family taking from me. After dinner, as Rachel showed Tyler and some visiting relatives around the backyard garden, my father beckoned me into his study. The room smelled of leather and pipe tobacco, a scent I once associated with comfort but now felt suffocating. Mom followed us in, closing the heavy oak door behind her. Well, that went wonderfully, Dad said, settling into his leather chair behind the desk. Everyone is thrilled for Rachel and Tyler. What exactly was that? I demanded, remaining standing despite Mom's gesture toward a chair. You announced I'm giving away my apartment without ever asking me? Lower your voice, Jude, Mom admonished. There's no need for dramatics. Dramatics? You just publicly committed me to giving away my home, the home I worked years to afford, the home I renovated with my own hands, without even consulting me. Dad leaned forward, his expression shifting to the stern look I remembered from childhood scoldings. Family helps family, Jude. That's how we raised you. Helping family doesn't mean giving them everything I own. Don't exaggerate, Mom said dismissively. It's one apartment. You're single. You have a good job. You don't need that much space anyway. The casual dismissal of my life choices hit like a physical blow. Whether I need it or not isn't the point. It's mine. I earned it. I paid for it. I love living there. Rachel and Tyler are starting a family, Dad countered. They need a stable home in a good neighborhood. Your sister has always dreamed of living downtown. Then she should work for it like I did. I spent 3 years saving every penny, working overtime, taking side gigs. I gave up vacations, new clothes, eating out. I earned that apartment. Mom's expression softened into something more dangerous than anger. Pity. Sweetheart, don't you want your sister to have a good start in life? Wouldn't you feel terrible if they struggled when you could easily help? I'm happy to help them find an apartment. I'll help them move. I'll even loan them money for a deposit. But I am not giving them my home. Dad's patience was visibly thinning. This isn't just about an apartment, Jude. This is about family commitment. Rachel has always been there for you. This blatant rewriting of history nearly made me laugh. When? Name one time Rachel made a significant sacrifice for me. Neither parent answered directly. Dad cleared his throat and tried another angle. Your mother and I have always supported both of you equally. Another fiction. They had paid for Rachel's education entirely while contributing nothing to mine. They had bought her a car for graduation. I had received a watch. They had subsidized her rent during rough patches. I had lived with roommates in a cramped apartment to make ends meet. This isn't about equality, I said. It's about respect. You didn't even ask me before announcing this to everyone. We didn't think you'd make such a fuss, Mom replied. You've always been the reasonable one. The door opened, and Rachel entered, her timing too perfect to be coincidental. She had clearly been listening outside. What's going on? She asked, though her defensive posture made it clear she already knew. Jude is being difficult about the apartment, Dad explained. Rachel turned to me, her expression a practiced mix of hurt and disappointment. I thought you were happy to help us out. Mom said you suggested it. I never suggested anything of the kind, I replied firmly. This is the first I've heard about any of this. But we've already told everyone, she protested, as if the public announcement made my consent irrelevant. Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim, my friends from college, everyone at my office. That's not my problem. You shouldn't have told anyone without asking me first. We're family, she insisted, echoing our father's earlier sentiment. Family helps family. You have that big apartment all to yourself, while Tyler and I are looking at places we can barely afford in unsafe neighborhoods. I worked for that apartment, I repeated, frustrated at having to defend my right to my own property. I saved for years. I renovated it myself. And now you have the chance to do something meaningful with it, Mom interjected, as if my living there wasn't meaningful enough. Tyler's already excited about it, Rachel added. He's talking about converting your office into a nursery. The casual way they discussed repurposing my space, erasing my presence from my own home, ignited something in me. 3 decades of being overlooked, taken for granted, and expected to sacrifice without recognition boiled over. Let me be absolutely clear, I said, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through me. I am not giving anyone my apartment, not as a gift, not as a loan, not temporarily, not permanently. It's my home, purchased with my money, renovated with my labor, and I'm staying there. You're being selfish, Rachel snapped, dropping the pretense of hurt for anger. Wanting to keep my own property isn't selfish. Expecting someone else to give you their home is selfish. Dad stood up. His authority pose that had intimidated me as a child, but now seemed merely theatrical. This isn't just about you, Jude. This is about what's best for the family. My financial stability and independence are what's best for me, I countered. And I'm part of this family too, despite how often that seems to be forgotten. No one's forgotten you, Mom protested weakly. Really? Because announcing I'm giving away my home without consulting me suggests otherwise. We just assumed you'd want to help your sister, Dad insisted, and I would help her in reasonable ways. This isn't reasonable. This is taking advantage. Rachel's face flushed with anger, After everything we've done for you, this false narrative was the final straw. What exactly have you done for me, Rachel? Specifically? She stammered, unable to produce examples. That's not fair. We're family. Family respects each other's boundaries. Family asks, before making commitments on someone else's behalf. Family doesn't take advantage. Dad's voice hardened. I think you need to reconsider your position, Jude. Sleep on it. Think about your sister's needs and how your stubbornness will affect the family. The message was clear. My needs were secondary. My feelings irrelevant. My property a resource for family allocation, rather than my own hard-earned achievement. There's nothing to reconsider, I said, reaching for the door. The apartment is mine. I'm not giving it away. End of discussion. This isn't the end, Rachel warned. We've already told everyone. You're making us look foolish. You made yourselves look foolish by promising something that wasn't yours to give. I walked out, ignoring my mother's calls to come back and discuss things reasonably. In the driveway, I sat in my car for several minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from both parents and Rachel, but I ignored them. The drive back to my apartment, was a blur of hurt and disbelief. How could they have so little regard for me that they would volunteer my home without asking? How could they dismiss my objections as selfishness rather than reasonable boundaries? By the time I unlocked my front door, one thing was clear. This wasn't just about an apartment. It was about respect, boundaries, and my place in the family. And for once in my life, I wasn't going to quietly acquiesce to keep the peace. The week following the dinner was a barrage of communication I wasn't prepared for. My phone constantly lit up with messages from family members, each one more presumptuous than the last. Aunt Carol texted about how proud she was of my generosity. Uncle Jim called to reminisce about how he had helped his brother buy his first house, drawing strained parallels to my situation. Cousins I barely spoke to suddenly wanted to reconnect, their messages loaded with heavy hints about my wonderful gift to Rachel. Most messages assumed my consent was a given, and the few that acknowledged my reluctance framed it as temporary cold feet or unnecessary concern. Rachel said, "You're just working out the details," one cousin wrote. "Such a wonderful thing you're doing for her." My parents alternated between guilt trips and attempts at negotiation. Mom's messages emphasized family obligation and Rachel's dreams. "She's always loved your apartment," one text read, as if coveting something justified owning it. Dad took a more practical approach, suggesting I could stay with them until I found a new place, completely disregarding my insistence that I wasn't moving at all. Rachel's tactics were more aggressive. She sent links to smaller apartments for rent, all well outside my preferred neighborhoods and budget range. "This one wouldn't be too bad for a single guy," she texted alongside a listing for a studio apartment that cost nearly as much as my mortgage had been, despite being 1/3 the size. When these passive-aggressive hints didn't work, she escalated to direct accusations of sabotaging her happiness. "Tyler and I have already started planning where our furniture will go," she wrote. "Why are you making this so difficult? It's just an apartment. You can get another one." 3 days after the dinner, I was at work trying to focus on coding a new security system when the receptionist called. "Your sister and her fiancé are here to see you," she announced, sounding uncertain. "They don't have an appointment." Before I could respond, Rachel and Tyler appeared in the doorway of my office. Rachel wore the determined expression I recognized from childhood demands, while Tyler looked uncomfortable but resolute. "We need to talk," Rachel announced loudly enough that heads turned in the open office plan. "You're ignoring our calls and texts." I rose quickly, embarrassment heating my face as colleagues pretended not to watch the drama unfolding. "This isn't the place," I said quietly, gesturing toward the door. "I'm working." "When exactly should we discuss it then?" Rachel demanded, making no move to lower her voice. "Since you won't answer your phone or door," damage control mode activated, I guided them toward a small conference room, nodding apologetically to my supervisor who watched with concern. "What are you doing?" I hissed once the door closed behind us. "This is my workplace." "We're running out of time," Rachel insisted. "The wedding is in 6 weeks. We need to know when we can start moving things in." The assumption that my refusal was merely a delay tactic rather than a firm no was infuriating. There is no when. I'm not giving you my apartment. I've been clear about this. Your parents said you'd come around. Tyler spoke for the first time, his tone suggesting he was less certain than Rachel. My parents don't speak for me, I replied firmly, and they had no right to offer you something that belongs to me. Rachel's eyes narrowed. So you're really going to do this? Ruin our wedding plans over an apartment? I'm not ruining anything. Your wedding can proceed exactly as planned. Your housing situation is separate from that. But everyone knows about it now, she protested. My friends have already congratulated us on the amazing apartment. Mom posted about it on Facebook. That was news to me, and it explained the sudden influx of distant relatives commenting on my generosity. The public nature of their announcement was clearly a strategy to increase pressure through social expectations. That's not my problem, I maintained. You should have consulted me before telling anyone. Tyler, looking increasingly uncomfortable, placed a hand on Rachel's arm. Maybe we should discuss alternatives, he suggested cautiously. If Jude isn't willing to give us the apartment. He has to, Rachel interrupted. Mom and Dad already promised. They promised something that wasn't theirs to give, I said, checking my watch. I need to get back to work. This discussion is over. I'm not giving you my apartment. Period. Rachel's face flushed with anger. You'll regret this, Jude. Family is supposed to support each other. Support goes both ways, I replied, and it doesn't include taking advantage of each other. As they finally left, I returned to my desk aware of curious glances from co-workers. My supervisor, Martin, approached casually. Everything okay? He asked. Family drama? I explained vaguely. Sorry about the disruption. No problem, he said. But if you need some personal time, the implication that my work might suffer from the distraction was concerning. I had recently been promoted. The last thing I needed was for family drama to impact my professional reputation. I've got it under control, I assured him, though I felt anything but in control. That evening, I met my best friend Alex for drinks at our usual bar. Alex had known me since college and understood my family dynamics better than most. They did what? He exclaimed when I explained the situation. That's insane. They can't just give away your property. The validation was immensely comforting after days of gaslighting from my family. They seem to think they can, I said, taking a long sip of beer, or at least that I'll cave to avoid conflict. Which you usually do, Alex pointed out bluntly. No offense, but you've always been the family peacekeeper. You give in to keep the harmony. His assessment was uncomfortably accurate. Throughout my life, I had compromised my own needs and wants to maintain family peace. When Rachel wanted my bedroom during college breaks because hers was being renovated, I slept on the couch without complaint. When my parents volunteered me for family obligations without asking, I rearranged my schedule to accommodate them. The pattern was well established. Not this time, I said firmly. This is different. It's different in scale, but not in kind, Alex observed. They've always expected you to sacrifice for Rachel. The apartment is just bigger than previous demands. His perspective helped clarify something I'd been struggling to articulate. It's a pattern, I realized aloud. They don't respect my boundaries because I've never firmly enforced them. Exactly, Alex nodded. And they won't start respecting them until you make it clear there are consequences for crossing them. That night, I discovered my mother's Facebook post celebrating Rachel and Tyler's wonderful news about moving into Jude's beautiful downtown apartment as a wedding gift. The post had dozens of likes and comments praising my generosity. The public pressure was mounting, exactly as they had intended. My phone rang continuously throughout the evening. Friends who had seen the post called to ask about my apparent move. Extended family members left voicemails about my wonderful gesture. Even my elderly grandmother called to say how proud she was that I was helping Rachel start her married life right. The pressure was taking a physical toll. I struggled to sleep, waking frequently with anxiety about confrontations to come. My appetite diminished, and focus at work became increasingly difficult. The constant barrage of messages made me jump every time my phone buzzed, and the anticipated conflict left me in a perpetual state of tension. By the end of the week, my parents had escalated their tactics. They reached out to my college friends, including some I hadn't spoken to in years, asking them to talk sense into me. One former roommate called, confused, saying my mother had told him I was having a breakdown and needed intervention. The manipulation was as transparent as it was effective. With each passing day, more people became involved. The narrative spread further, and the expectation of my compliance grew stronger. The simple fact that I owned my property and had never agreed to give it away seemed increasingly irrelevant in the face of family expectations and public announcements. 2 weeks after the fateful dinner, I returned home from a particularly grueling day at work to find my parents' car parked outside my building. A sense of dread settled in my stomach as I took the elevator to my floor. I had deliberately avoided direct confrontation since the workplace incident, limiting communication to brief text messages reiterating my position. The sound of voices from within my apartment stopped me cold as I approached my door. Using the key I had given them for emergencies only, my parents had let themselves in. Worse, they weren't alone. I unlocked the door to find my mother, father, Rachel, and Tyler standing in my living room. Rachel was holding a measuring tape against my wall, while Tyler made notes on a tablet. My mother was opening kitchen cabinets, examining the contents as if inventorying what would stay or go. "What are you doing in my home?" I demanded, dropping my laptop bag on the entry table with a thud that made everyone turn. "Jude!" My mother recovered first, her surprise quickly masked with a smile. "We were just getting some measurements for the furniture. Tyler and I want to make sure our sectional will fit along this wall," Rachel added casually, as if this was a perfectly normal situation, "and we're thinking of painting this room a different color." The audacity was breathtaking. They had entered my home without permission to plan renovations for a property transfer I had explicitly refused. "Get out," I said quietly, a calm that belied the rage building inside me. "All of you. Now, Jude," my father began in his reasoning tone. "We know you're still processing this change, but the wedding is approaching quickly. Practical arrangements need to be made." "There is no change to process," I replied, my voice rising despite efforts to control it. "I told you repeatedly, I am not giving away my apartment. Not to Rachel, not to anyone." "We thought you just needed time," my mother said soothingly. "You've always been one to think things through carefully. What part of no requires careful thought? This is my home, mine, purchased with my money, renovated with my time and effort. I live here. I'm not leaving." Rachel rolled her eyes dramatically. "You're being ridiculous. It's just walls and floors. You can find another place." "If it's just walls and floors, you can find another place," I countered. "One you actually purchase yourselves, like adults." Tyler, at least, had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Maybe we should discuss this another time," he suggested. "There's nothing to discuss. You're trespassing in my home. I want you to leave now." My father's expression hardened. "That's no way to speak to your family, son. Family doesn't break into my apartment to measure for furniture after I've explicitly said I'm not giving it to them." "We didn't break in," my mother protested. "We used the key you gave us. For emergencies," I clarified. "Not for this. Never for this." Rachel stepped forward, her expression shifting to the manipulative sweetness she had perfected since childhood. "Jude, be reasonable. You know how much this apartment would mean to us. We're starting our life together. We want to begin a family soon. This neighborhood has the best schools. Then save for it like I did," I replied. "Work overtime. Make sacrifices. Budget carefully. That's how adults acquire property." "We don't have years to wait," she protested. "The wedding is in a month." "Your poor planning isn't my emergency," I said, echoing a phrase my father had often used during my childhood when I failed to prepare adequately for school projects. The irony wasn't lost on him, judging by his grimace. "This isn't just about the apartment anymore," my father said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone that had ended many childhood arguments. "This is about your commitment to this family, your willingness to support your sister, and your willingness to acknowledge my boundaries," I countered. "My right to my own property, my autonomy as an adult." "If that's how you feel," my father said slowly, "then perhaps you need to reconsider your place in this family." The implied threat hung in the air. Comply or face exclusion. It was the nuclear option, the ultimate leverage they believed would force my capitulation as it had so many times before. Something broke inside me, not in surrender but in liberation. If my place in this family requires giving up everything I've worked for, then maybe it's not a place worth having. My mother gasped. Rachel's eyes widened. Tyler looked at the floor, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. "You don't mean that," my mother said shakily. "We're your family." "Family respects each other," I replied. "Family doesn't take advantage. Family doesn't issue ultimatums or threats." "No one's threatening you," my father backpedaled, realizing he had overplayed his hand. "We're just trying to help Rachel and Tyler start their lives together. At my expense. Without my consent. That's not help, that's exploitation." Rachel's manipulative facade cracked. "You've always been selfish. Always thinking about yourself. Wanting to keep my own property isn't selfish. Expecting someone else to give you their home is selfish. You have until the wedding to reconsider," my father announced, gathering his coat. "After that, don't expect to be welcome at family gatherings if this is your attitude." The blatant conditional nature of their love was both painful and clarifying. All these years, I had sacrificed to maintain my place in a family that viewed me primarily as a resource, rather than a person with valid needs and boundaries. "I think you should all leave now," I said calmly, "and I'll need my emergency key back." "Jude, be reasonable," my mother pleaded. "I am being reasonable. I'm enforcing a boundary that any reasonable person would respect. Don't enter my home without permission, and don't try to take my property." Reluctantly, my father retrieved the key from his keychain and placed it on the counter. With final looks of disappointment and anger, they filed out of my apartment. Rachel paused at the door. "This isn't over," she warned. "You'll regret choosing an apartment over your family." "I'm not choosing an apartment over family," I corrected her. "I'm choosing self-respect over exploitation. There's a difference." After they left, I immediately called a locksmith who arrived within the hour to change all the locks. The cost was considerable for same-day emergency service, but the security of knowing they couldn't enter uninvited again was worth every penny. While waiting for the locksmith, I called my friend Thomas, who worked as a lawyer specializing in property law. I explained the situation, feeling slightly ridiculous about needing legal advice for a family dispute. "Actually, this is more common than you might think," Thomas reassured me. "Family members often feel entitled to shared property or assets without formal agreements. But this isn't shared property," I pointed out. "It's solely mine. My name only on the deed. I paid for it entirely." "Which makes your case straightforward legally, if not emotionally," he replied. "Let me draft a formal letter stating your position. Something official on letterhead might help them understand you're serious." "You think I need to threaten legal action against my own family?" The idea was simultaneously disturbing and sad. Not threaten necessarily, just establish clear boundaries with the weight of legal formality behind them. Sometimes people need to see something in writing from a third party to take it seriously. That evening, I began documenting every interaction related to the apartment situation. Dates, times, who was present, what was said, any witnesses. I saved texts, emails, and voicemails from family members discussing the apartment. If this escalated further, I wanted a clear record of my consistent refusal and their persistent boundary violations. The next morning, I installed a security camera at my front door, something I never imagined needing for protection from my own family. The feeling of having to fortify my home against relatives was surreal and profoundly sad. As I reviewed the security settings on my new camera system, the reality of the situation hit me fully for the first time. My relationship with my family might never be the same again. The conditional nature of their love and respect had been exposed in ways that couldn't be unseen. The comfortable fiction of family harmony had been shattered, revealing a dynamic built on uneven expectations and one-sided sacrifice. Yet alongside the grief was an unexpected feeling of liberation. For years I had contorted myself to fit their expectations, sacrificed my needs for their convenience, and accepted their dismissal of my boundaries. Standing firm now, despite the pain and conflict, felt like reclaiming a part of myself long surrendered. The apartment, which had always represented my independence and achievement, now symbolized something even more important: my self-respect and autonomy. Whatever happened next, I knew I couldn't go back to the old pattern of acquiescence. Some boundaries, once established, cannot be uncrossed without losing an essential part of yourself. In the days following the apartment confrontation, I realized I needed more than just legal protection. I needed emotional clarity and strategic planning. The situation had exposed deep-rooted family dynamics that required professional insight to navigate, so I made an appointment with Dr. Marisa Bennett, a therapist specializing in family conflicts. "What you're describing is unfortunately common," Dr. Bennett explained during our first session. "Family systems often develop patterns that benefit certain members at the expense of others. These patterns can continue into adulthood until someone disrupts them." "That someone being me, apparently," I replied. "Yes. When you enforce boundaries that have previously been fluid or non-existent, you're changing the system. Everyone in that system will resist because it disrupts their understanding of how things work." Her validation that my resistance wasn't selfish or unreasonable provided immense relief. For days I had been second-guessing myself, wondering if I was overreacting or being unnecessarily stubborn. "Your apartment represents more than property," she continued. "For you, it's tangible proof of your independence and accomplishment. For your family, it's a resource they feel entitled to redistribute according to their priorities, which have never included my needs or wishes," I added. "Exactly. The pattern appears to be that your needs are secondary to your sister's, and your parents enable and reinforce this dynamic." Over several sessions, we traced this pattern back through my childhood and adolescence. The expectations had always been different. Rachel's needs were emergencies requiring immediate family mobilization, while mine were inconveniences to be managed independently. Rachel's achievements received celebration, while mine earned brief acknowledgement before conversation returned to her latest news. "This isn't just about an apartment," I realized aloud during our third session. "It's about years of unequal treatment and disregarded boundaries." "Yes. And addressing it effectively requires more than just saying no this time. You need a comprehensive strategy that acknowledges the deeper patterns while establishing clear boundaries moving forward." Together, we developed a three-part approach. First, I would formally document my position in writing, addressing not just the apartment issue but the pattern of disrespect it represented. Second, I would establish clear, non-negotiable boundaries about my property and personal autonomy. Third, I would offer a path forward for our relationship that respected these boundaries while still allowing for family connection. The letter took days to draft. I wanted to be firm without being cruel, clear without being combative. The final version began, "Dear Mom, Dad, and Rachel, I'm writing to address the ongoing situation regarding my apartment, and more importantly, the family dynamics it has exposed. To be absolutely clear, I am not giving, lending, or transferring my apartment to Rachel and Tyler under any circumstances. This is my legal property, purchased with my money, and I intend to continue living there indefinitely. More concerning than the request itself is how it was handled. Announcing this gift publicly, without my knowledge or consent, demonstrated profound disrespect for my autonomy and boundaries." The letter continued, outlining specific instances of boundary violations, from the dinner announcement to the unauthorized apartment entry. It clarified that while I valued family relationships, those relationships needed to be built on mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. I concluded with clear terms for moving forward. 1. My apartment is not available for Rachel and Tyler. Period. Any further discussion of this topic is closed. 2. No family member may enter my home without explicit invitation each time. 3. No decisions regarding my property or life will be made without my direct involvement and consent. 4. Family gatherings must include respectful treatment of all members, including acknowledgement of my boundaries. I hope we can rebuild our relationship on healthier foundations, but that requires acknowledgement of these issues and commitment to change. Before sending it, I shared the draft with my Uncle Philip, my father's younger brother who had always been something of a family outlier himself. Unlike my parents, Philip had pursued a creative career as a writer rather than the family tradition of accounting, causing friction that had never fully resolved. "This is exceptionally well written," Philip commented after reading it. "Clear, firm, but not burning bridges." "You think they'll listen?" I asked. Philip sighed. "It won't be easy. This pattern with your sister goes back further than you might realize. Your grandfather did the same with your father, always favoring him over me. It's a generational pattern." This new context was illuminating. Dad was the golden child too? Very much so. Grandpa paid for his college, set him up in business, gave him the down payment for their first house. Meanwhile, I worked through school and built my career from nothing. So Dad's just repeating what he experienced, I mused. People tend to replicate what they know, even when it wasn't healthy. Your father benefited from that inequity, so he sees it as normal, even appropriate. Uncle Philip's insight provided crucial perspective. This wasn't just about my immediate family, but about patterns transmitted through generations. Breaking the cycle wouldn't be easy precisely because it was so deeply ingrained. "What would you do in my position?" I asked him. "Exactly what you're doing," he replied without hesitation. "Stand firm. The pattern won't change unless someone refuses to participate in it. I wish I'd done it sooner in my own life." With this additional perspective, I finalized the letter and emailed it to my parents and Rachel, with copies to Uncle Philip and my therapist for accountability. The response was predictably defensive. Mom called in tears, focusing on how hurt she was by my accusations rather than addressing the substance of my concerns. Dad sent a terse email about family loyalty and tradition. Rachel didn't respond directly but posted passive-aggressive social media updates about selfish people who don't understand family commitment. Their reactions, while painful, confirmed Dr. Bennett's assessment. They were resisting the disruption to the established system. The question now was whether they could adapt to new boundaries or if the relationship would fracture permanently. Unexpectedly, Tyler reached out to me directly, requesting a private meeting without Rachel or my parents. We met at a coffee shop near my office during lunch. "I need to tell you something," he began awkwardly. "I never wanted your apartment." This was surprising given his apparent enthusiasm during the measuring incident. "You seemed on board with the plan when you were in my living room taking notes." He looked genuinely ashamed. "Rachel told me you had enthusiastically offered it, that you were excited to help us start our lives together. I only realized at the dinner that wasn't true. And yet you continued with the planning? Rachel was so set on it, and your parents were so insistent that you'd come around." He stared into his coffee. "To be honest, I've been uncomfortable with how your family treats you since we met. The expectations seem very one-sided." His observation from an outsider's perspective validated my own experience. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because things are getting out of hand. Your parents are talking about excluding you from the wedding if you don't cooperate. Rachel's already asked her friend Marcus to step in as a groomsman in case you're difficult. The casual cruelty of planning my replacement at a family event I hadn't even refused to attend was breathtaking. And you're okay with all this?" Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "No, I'm not. That's why I'm here. I've tried talking to Rachel, but she's convinced she deserves your apartment. Something about how your parents always helped her out, and this is just an extension of that support. But it's not their apartment to give," I pointed out. "I know that, and I think deep down they know it too. But admitting it would mean acknowledging the whole pattern, which seems to be something they're not willing to do." His insight was surprisingly perceptive for someone relatively new to the family dynamic. "So, what happens now?" "I'm going to talk to Rachel again. Make it clear that I won't participate in pressuring you. We can find our own place, like normal couples do. But I thought you should know what they're planning in terms of the wedding." His warning gave me time to prepare emotionally for potential exclusion from a significant family event. While painful, it would be another data point confirming that my place in the family was conditional on compliance rather than assured by connection. As the wedding date approached, the pressure intensified. Extended family members called with concern about the family rift. Friends reached out confused by conflicting narratives. My parents' version of events had spread widely. Their ungrateful son was selfishly withholding help from his sister at a crucial time in her life. After consultation with Dr. Bennett, I decided to address the public narrative directly. Since my parents had chosen to make this a public issue with their Facebook announcements and family discussions, silence was only allowing their version to dominate. I crafted a simple, factual social media post. Several people have asked about rumors regarding my apartment. To clarify, I never offered my home to anyone. The announcement at a family dinner that I would be gifting my apartment to Rachel and Tyler was made without my knowledge or consent. While I wish them every happiness in their marriage, they will need to find their own home, as I continue to live in mine. I appreciate your understanding and respect for my privacy during this family matter. The post was deliberately non-emotional and factual, avoiding accusations while clearly stating my position. The response was mixed. Some family members expressed shock at learning I hadn't consented to the arrangement. Others maintained that regardless of the miscommunication, I should do the right thing and give up my home anyway. Friends were generally supportive, many expressing disbelief at the presumption behind the original demand. Most importantly, the post shifted the narrative from one of my selfishness to one of inappropriate expectations and boundary violations. It became increasingly difficult for my parents and Rachel to maintain their position when the basic fact that I never agreed to give away my home became widely understood. 2 weeks before the wedding, Uncle Philip called with news. "Your father reached out to me," he said. "I think your letter and social media post finally broke through. He's asking how they can resolve this without losing you entirely." "What did you tell him?" "That they need to acknowledge what happened, apologize sincerely, and respect your boundaries moving forward. No more manipulation, no more public announcements about your property, no more treating you as an accessory to Rachel's life, rather than a person with your own legitimate needs." It was the first glimmer of potential resolution, though I remained cautious. Years of patterns wouldn't change overnight, and any reconciliation would require sustained effort and recognition, not just a quick apology to smooth things over temporarily. With careful planning and support from Dr. Bennett, Uncle Philip, and friends like Alex, I prepared for a family meeting. Whatever happened next would determine the future of my relationship with my parents and sister. The apartment issue had exposed deep dysfunctions in our family system, but perhaps it could also be the catalyst for healthier patterns moving forward. The question was whether everyone was willing to do the necessary work for real change. The family meeting was scheduled at a neutral location, a private room in a restaurant downtown, with Uncle Philip present as a mediator. I arrived early, settling my nerves with deep breathing exercises Dr. Bennett had taught me. When my parents entered, they looked older somehow, the strain of recent weeks evident in their faces. Rachel arrived last, Tyler by her side looking uncomfortable but supportive. "Thank you all for coming," Uncle Philip began once everyone was seated. "We're here to address the situation regarding Jude's apartment and the larger family dynamics it has revealed. The goal is understanding and resolution, not blame." My father cleared his throat. "Before we start, I want to say something." He looked directly at me, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "We made a mistake, Jude. A serious one. We should never have announced you were giving your apartment to Rachel and Tyler without discussing it with you first." The simple acknowledgement, something I had been seeking for weeks, was surprisingly powerful. My mother nodded in agreement, though Rachel stared at the table, arms crossed defensively. "It wasn't just a mistake," I replied carefully. "It was part of a pattern where my boundaries and autonomy aren't respected, where Rachel's needs are automatically prioritized over mine." "That's not fair," Rachel interjected. "You've always been Dad's favorite." This was so contrary to my experience that I nearly laughed. "In what way?" "Dad paid for your college. You got a car for graduation. When you couldn't make rent, they covered it. I worked through school, bought my own car, and lived with roommates to make ends meet." "But they're always bragging about your job, your independence," she countered. "Nothing I do is ever good enough." This revelation of her perspective was startling. While I had felt overlooked in favor of Rachel, she apparently harbored similar feelings of inadequacy compared to me. The dynamic was more complex than I had realized. "It sounds like you both feel unseen in different ways," Uncle Philip observed. "Robert, Linda, would you care to respond?" My parents exchanged glances, seemingly at a loss. "We've always been proud of both of you," Mom offered weakly. We never meant to make either of you feel less valued. Intentions aside, the impact has been real, I pointed out, and the apartment situation brought it to a breaking point. Tyler, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. I want to apologize as well. When Rachel told me about the apartment, I should have questioned whether Jude had actually offered it. I got caught up in the excitement without considering his position. His willingness to take responsibility stood in stark contrast to Rachel's defensive posture. So what now? She demanded. We're supposed to start our married life in some tiny apartment, while Jude keeps his perfect place all to himself? Yes, I said simply, because it's my home. Just like your first home together will be yours, not something taken from someone else. We found a place, Tyler revealed, surprising Rachel. A 2-bedroom in Somerville. It's not downtown, but it's a good starter apartment in a nice area. You did what? Rachel turned to him, shock evident on her face. When were you going to tell me? After this meeting, he replied steadily. I wanted to resolve this situation first. The revelation changed the dynamic in the room. With an alternative solution already in progress, the pressure regarding my apartment dissipated somewhat. I think we need to address the deeper issues, my father said, showing unexpected insight. Philip has helped me see that I've been repeating patterns from my own upbringing. My father favored me over Philip, and somehow I created a similar dynamic between you two. It wasn't intentional, Mom added. We thought we were responding to your different needs. Rachel seemed to need more support, while Jude was so independent. But my independence was born of necessity, not preference, I explained. I knew asking for help wasn't really an option for me the way it was for Rachel. The conversation continued for hours, peeling back layers of family dynamics that had shaped all of our relationships. There were difficult moments, tears, and occasional flares of defensive anger. But gradually, understanding began to emerge from the chaos. By the end of the evening, we had established several key agreements. First, my apartment was unequivocally my property, and no further discussion of transferring it to Rachel and Tyler would occur. Second, my parents acknowledged the pattern of unequal treatment and committed to more balanced relationships moving forward. Third, Rachel and I agreed to work on our sibling relationship directly, without parental intervention or comparison. Most importantly, everyone recognized that respect for boundaries was non-negotiable for healthy family relationships. My parents returned the spare key they had kept, despite the lock change, symbolically acknowledging my right to control access to my space. The wedding is in 2 weeks, Rachel said as we prepared to leave. Will you still be a groomsman? The invitation, after weeks of tension and threatened exclusion, felt like an olive branch. Yes, I replied, as long as we're clear that my participation isn't conditional on giving up my apartment. It's not, Tyler assured me quickly. We want you there because you're family. In the days following the meeting, small changes began to emerge. My father called to discuss a baseball game rather than immediately launching into Rachel-centric conversation. My mother texted to ask about my work project without comparing it to anything Rachel was doing. Small steps, but meaningful ones. The wedding proceeded without dramatic incident. I stood beside Tyler as planned, exchanged civil conversation with extended family, and even shared a genuine moment of connection with Rachel during the reception. I'm sorry, she said quietly as we danced an obligatory sibling dance. I got caught up in what I thought I deserved without considering what you had worked for. And I probably could have been more understanding about your housing stress, I conceded, though not to the point of giving up my home. She laughed slightly. The apartment in Somerville is actually nice. Tyler says we can fix it up together, make it our own. That's how it should be, I agreed. Your first place together, built with your own efforts. 6 months after the wedding, the family dynamic continued to evolve. My parents made conscious efforts to treat Rachel and me with more equality, though old habits occasionally resurfaced. Rachel and Tyler settled into their Somerville apartment, gradually renovating it with their own style. Our sibling relationship remained complicated but improved, as we learned to communicate directly rather than through our parents. The most profound change, however, was within me. Standing firm on my boundaries, despite intense pressure and emotional manipulation, had strengthened my sense of self-worth. I no longer felt compelled to sacrifice my needs to maintain family harmony. I could love my family while still requiring respect and reciprocity. One Sunday evening, as I relaxed in my apartment, I reflected on the entire experience. The property that had nearly torn my family apart had ultimately become the catalyst for healthier relationships. By refusing to perpetuate dysfunctional patterns, I had helped create space for new, more balanced dynamics to emerge. The journey had been painful, the confrontations difficult, but the outcome was worth it. Not just in keeping my home, but in establishing my worth within my family system. The apartment represented more than physical space. It symbolized my right to exist as an individual with valid needs and boundaries, not merely as an extension of others' expectations. As I watched the sunset from my living room window, I thought about the lessons learned through this ordeal. Family love should never require surrendering your autonomy or dignity. Healthy relationships thrive on mutual respect, not one-sided sacrifice. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to stand firm when boundaries are crossed. What about your family dynamics? Have you ever had to stand up against unreasonable expectations or demands? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more about navigating complex family relationships. And remember, blood relation doesn't give anyone the right to make decisions about your life or property without your consent. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength in maintaining your own healthy boundaries.